Genesis chapter 12, the call of Abram. Now we're getting into Abraham's portion of Genesis. Well, this is before he's called Abraham. Originally he was called Abram, but we're getting into that now. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Abram in Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while, because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. When Pharaoh summoned Abram, "What have you done to me?" he said. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. Chapter 13. Abram and Lot separate. So when Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him, Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From the Negev he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herders and Lot's. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herders and mine, for we are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zor was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, which we'll eventually get to that. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, "Look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. Chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. When God saw the wickedness in Noah's day, he reestablished his plan by choosing one faithful man. We see the same pattern happening here with Abram. God's desire was still to fill the earth with his glory and bless all the peoples. But he began that mission by calling one individual. Thus God commanded Abram to leave his land, his relatives, and his father's house to go to a new land. Abram had to act in faith because he did not know where God was leading him. He only knew that if he would obey, God would respond by making him into a great nation, making his name great, and even using him to bring blessing to others. God was advancing his kingdom agenda through Abram. Verse 4 through 7. Abram obeyed God's command, leaving Haran with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all the other people who were stepping out in faith with Abram. When he arrived at the Oak of Moreh, most likely a Canaanite worship center, God promised to give this land to Abram's offspring. Abram's faith and action had led to further illumination. This is God's pattern. Not only does obedience lead to blessing, but it also leads to greater clarity of God's will, purpose, and direction in our lives. God speaks in concert with our obedience, not with our rebellion. Verse 7 through 9. Abram responded to God's promise by building 2 altars to the true God, one at the Oak of Moreh and another in Bethel. These altars represented public declarations of faith in the midst of a pagan environment. We may not build some altars today, but we too should make public declarations of our faith in God, even when our society wants nothing to do with him. Verse 10. Abram began his journey of faith well, obediently leaving Haran, traveling to Canaan and making declarations of allegiance to God along the way. But his faith soon gave way to fear. A famine caused Abram and his family to travel to Egypt for food. This was a bad move because God had made it clear that he wanted Abram in Canaan, not Egypt. The moment Abram assessed the situation from a human perspective, he made a decision that threatened to jeopardize God's program. Verse 11 through 15. While in Egypt, Abram's fear grew. He worried that someone might see Sarai's beauty and kill him to get her. So he hatched a plan to save his skin. Sarai was to say that she was Abram's sister, which according to chapter 20, verse 12, was half true. Abram may have reasoned that any serious suitor would have to ask him for permission to marry Sarai, which would give them enough time to escape, but not just any suitor showed interest. Pharaoh himself wanted Sarai for a wife, so he bypassed the normal conventions and welcomed her right into the palace. Verse 16. The immediate outcome of this little drama was that Abram got fabulously wealthy, but at what cost? No amount of money could make up for the fact that Abram was ready to give up his wife and abandon the promise of God for mere self-preservation. Verse 17 through 20. This odd story demonstrates God's commitment to his kingdom program and promises. He sent severe plagues to Pharaoh's household, which immediately signaled to the people involved that they had been deceived. Pharaoh, whose position of power would have allowed him to do nearly anything, acted with more integrity than Abram in giving Sarai back without punishing the couple in any way. Chapter 13, verse 1 through 7. Having been sent away from Egypt, Abram and his family journeyed to the Negev, then from the Negev to Bethel, gradually making their way back toward the land of promise. By this point, Abram had become rich in livestock, silver, and gold. But so had his nephew Lot. Had the men's wealth just been in silver and gold, they would have had no problem, but their herds were too vast for any one area. There simply wasn't enough water and pasture for all of their livestock. Verse 8 through 9. Abram recognized that he and Lot had to separate. Surprisingly, though, Abram chose to preserve relationship over keeping the economic upper hand. He allowed Lot to pick his plot of land first. This was an incredibly generous decision. In that culture, as head of the household, Abram had every right to make the first choice himself, but he had faith in God's promise and provision, so he was able to defer to Lot. Verse 10 through 13. Lot looked at the 2 options and saw that the entire plain of the Jordan as far as Zoar was well watered everywhere. He saw the material wealth in front of him but failed to see what he should have, that it couldn't last. God was going to judge the region soon because the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. Yet Lot chose to get close to sin for the material gain and beauty of a moment, journeying eastward towards Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis, moving east was always a bad sign, and that is precisely the direction in which Lot was headed. Verse 14 through 17. Earlier, Lot lifted up his eyes and saw only what can be seen with the physical senses. Here, however, God lifted up Abram's eyes to see the spiritual promise of God. The great lesson for Israel and for us here is that we must get God's perspective on our situations, not relying on our own. We perceive only the temporary. God sees the eternal. What God offered to Abram was long-term. I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. Moreover, God seemed to increase his promise, now telling Abram that his descendants would multiply so dramatically that they would be as innumerable as the dust of the earth. Best of all, Abram wouldn't have had to do anything to make this happen. I will give it to you, God plainly told him. The beautiful part of obeying God is that you don't have to take what's yours. He gives it to you freely. Verse 18. Abram moved his tent near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, building there another altar to the Lord. He heard God's promise and received it, worshiping God because of his word and finding security in that word. Unlike he'd done during his time in Egypt, Abram was now moving by faith, not by sight, which would be the foundation not only of his obedience, but also the obedience that God wants for all who follow him. Seek 2 Corinthians 5:7. For we live by faith, not by sight. And that is the end of Genesis chapters 12 and 13. I hope everybody learned something. This is when you start to see Abram's faith really start to blossom in the sense that he starts to trust God. You know, he leaned too much on his own understanding and made a mistake in Egypt, but he learned from it and is proceeding better going forward. Now, he does continue to make mistakes, but he learns from every single one of those mistakes and grows to trust and have faith in God more as his life progresses. So, God bless everyone. I will see y'all next time.